hello, you and you and you. This is Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group. Welcome. At today's session, we're going to begin review of CDFM Module 4, Competency 4, which is life cycle sustainment. So we're continuing the acquisition process from 4.1, 2, and 3. And so I'm going to jump right into it. On chapter 4.1 talks about life cycle sustainment. So don't forget, program manager is in charge when they come up with a capability that's supposed to fill that capability gap. Then the program manager has to develop the total sustainment of that program, the total life cycle. How much does it cost? What are the requirements? What are the maintenance requirements, objectives, all of these things. And so life cycle sustainment, and we talk about life cycle sustainment plan as part of milestone B, is just a reminder of a responsibility, another responsibility for that program manager. So on page 441 at the bottom of the introduction, when you read that paragraph, you'll see it'll remind you that the program manager is responsible for providing the needed product support capability to maintain the readiness. Basically saying who's in charge of making sure the plan is established and how to sustain it? Program manager. This one should be real quick. Page 442, when do we consider life cycle sustainment? Do we wait until we develop the product and then, okay, how are we going to take care of the product? No. Life cycle sustainment planning is done early on when you're doing the material solution analysis and you're trying to figure out which course of action to go with. You're also contemplating what is it going to take to sustain it, to maintain that equipment over time. If it has a life cycle of 7 years, then I need to know, well, how am I going to take care of it? How much is it going to cost? So life cycle sustainment begins at material solution analysis when you're doing analysis of the alternatives. If you read page 442, trust me, that's what it's talking about. Some additional things that you want to know is on page 443, that first paragraph, and I'll read it as it states. Life cycle sustainment planning shall be considered when material solution analysis, and it shall mature as you go through the next phase, which is technology development. And then by the time you get to milestone B, which approval of milestone B is a formal initiation of an acquisition program, a life cycle sustainment plan shall be prepared for milestone B. So you start doing the planning part of it and how, because as you're coming up with courses of action, you're also coming up with, how am I going to sustain it? So you have to have the actual planning for sustainment is done prior to milestone B so that they can make a decision to go into the acquisition strategy. So technology development strategy, and then milestone B turns into acquisition strategy. So that also means that a life cycle sustainment plan is done in technology development strategy during that process. Because if it's done a material solution analysis and technology development, that whole process is combined in the technology. So that's why I say if you do the diagram and then put things where they go, you will see that technology development strategy incorporates material solution analysis. Milestone A, technology development, or for the newer study guides, technology maturation and risk reduction. And then all of that data is produced for milestone B, which also includes life cycle sustainment plan. So you see how it all rolls together? Don't make it any harder, because this is actually one of the easiest section of the modules for CDFM, the acquisition, because it's like directly from the book compared to the other modules, which you have to like concepts and you have to think real hard. You have to memorize formulas, well, more formulas than module 4. And so module 4 is much better. All right, let's look at the top of page 444. life cycle sustainment, optimize operational readiness. We're going to look, and I think the next section is the human, number 5 is the human systems engineering. Like now, those are the things we're going to think about when you put the warfighter into the equipment. Embedded training is the best training. That's item C on page 444. I do remember embedded keeps showing up because we want to make sure that as we're testing it, we embed the training in the testing of the product. Makes sense. So that I can actually put it in operation and see how well it performs. Here we go again. The program manager should work with the user. So the program manager has the user requirements. This is what I need. I'm the warfighter. This is the capability gap, says the JROC in the JSIS process. And document performance and sustainment requirements in a performance agreement. So that means with the program manager, now you have a performance agreement. This is what I want this equipment to do. I'm not telling you what type of aircraft, what type of vehicle I need. I'm telling you what I want that aircraft to do, what I want that vehicle to do. So the program manager documents that in that performance agreement to specify the outcome, the measures, the commitments, the stakeholder responsibility, and then the PM, I'm reading the paragraph on page 444, the PM shall employ effective performance-based life cycle support plan. Here's another work, some more work for the program manager. Because then when I have an agreement on detail what exactly I want, now you need to have an agreement and employ it, because now you need to get a contractor that performs and provides the outcome that I asked you for. The next sentence, DoD components shall initiate system modifications as necessary to improve performance and reduce ownership costs. Again, everything is about reducing the amount of money we pay. The last paragraph on page 444, at the end of each useful life, and we've talked about this in the last video, a system shall be demilitarized. If there are certain military capabilities on that aircraft that we're using as our example, before we dispose of it, before we sell it to an allied country, before we do anything with it, we got to take the military specific capabilities off of it. So that's what it's saying, based on legal and regulatory requirements. During the design process, program manager documents the hazardous materials contained, again, everything dealing with that program, that OSHA stuff, that safety, environment, all of that is the responsibility of the program manager. On page 445, it goes into life cycle sustainment considerations. As with everything, there's some topics that you have to discuss and think about as the program manager when you deal with life cycle. Product support. How is the warfighter going to support that product through the logistics part of it? Interoperability. Able to use with joint resources. If I'm building the aircraft for the Army, could the Air Force use it? Is there portions of Air Force or Navy capabilities that can use it, which allows the program manager to take advantage of joint capabilities? Because if you only make it for the Army, that means you're only going to get the sustainment from the Army. But if you make it where any service can use it, if they have it in the inventory, then so much better. You have more capabilities available to you to reduce your risk. Data management, integrated supply chain, all right, enhance, again, your capability. When you have more options and where you can get the parts for this aircraft, then it's better. So there should be nothing here that's like, what? Logistics footprint minimization. In addition to minimizing costs, the program manager must also strive to minimize the logistics burden that a system has, meaning we don't have to get multiple parts have to come through the supply system, logistics system to deploy in different locations. We're trying to minimize all the extra pieces that we're going to have. The footprint problem is an engineering problem. When we're building this aircraft, we have to address early on in the life cycle. Down to configuration management, since I have a note there. Configuration management definition is a process for establishing and maintaining the consistency. When we come up with the plan and the details, the objective, the standards, then configuration management is done to ensure that we maintain the consistency and functions of that aircraft throughout the life cycle. That as things progress, that it doesn't change what it is that we initially said that we need to fulfill and that capability gap. So if you move on to page 447, as I stated earlier, I didn't realize it was here also, is recapping again that pre-acquisition, acquisition, and let's see, post sustainment operations and support. So let me see if they have the diagram in your book. That diagram, I think, was in one of the earlier sessions. Yeah, milestone A, B, C. You probably can't see it as good when we get to page 443. They got a diagram there. But if you go back to the whole milestone, material solution, milestone A, technology, milestone B, EMD, milestone C, and so forth, and then you look at it, you see part of it is pre-system, part is acquisition. So that's what you're learning for this exam, is if it's a pre-acquisition process, what are those processes? If it's an acquisition, most likely than not starts at milestone B, because that's where your acquisition is initiated. So that should tell you anything before milestone B is in the pre-acquisition stage. It is supporting the technology development strategy. You see how I'm tying all them concepts? So you got to know where these things occur. All right, let's see what pre-systems, what I have here. Okay, so I think when we talked about the RAM, reliability, supportability, let's see, pre-system acquisition represents the first sustaining system, supportability and affordability by balancing threat scenarios, reducing your risk early on in the process. Reliability, reduce logistics footprint, and reduce system life cycle costs. Most effectively achieved through inclusion from the beginning. The best time to reduce acquisition costs is early on in the acquisition process. That concept is going to come up several times. So even though it's not directly stated like that here, but that's what it's saying. It's included from the very beginning of a program, starting with the definition of the needed capability. Once I know what the capability gap is and what I need to fill it, then as I'm moving along to come up with that capability, then I need to also be thinking about cost, schedule, performance, and reducing all of that in the process, right? Okay, acquisition. First line says, the system formally enters acquisition process when? At milestone B. If you don't remember nothing else, acquisition starts at milestone B. So acquisition phase. When the MDA approves EMD. And a key life cycle sustainment emphasis during EMD is to ensure operational supportability, in particular attention to minimizing the logistics footprint. We don't want that aircraft to need so many logistic support that it defeats the whole purpose of being flexible and being able to move when you need to move, because you got to wait on a part and the part takes a long time to get there. You know what I mean? Because depending on where you deploy, they might not have a direct route. Do we have to fly it in? What if they don't have a place to fly it in? So all of that is considered all early on in the process. Operational supportability and minimize logistics footprint. You see, a lot of this is repetitive. So the more you go over it, the more you'll get it. So pre-system acquisition, sustainment, operations, and support. So that tells me, okay, I'm in the operations and support part of the phases. All right, what I got here? While acquisition phases are critical, implementing a successful, I'm on top of page 448, affordable sustainment strategy, the ultimate measure of success, I look for those kind of words when I'm studying, is application of that strategy after the system has been deployed for operational use. So you can have a concept on paper, but until you put it into the field and actually use it, then that's when you get your true data. So while acquisition activities are critical, the acquisition phase activities are critical, what we did before, it's not until we implement a successful and affordable acquisition strategy once we put it into operation, right? Can't be that. Post initial operational capability, that IOC. There's a key date in here. Let's see, timeline. The DoD components conduct post-deployment reviews after we've deployed it for a certain amount of days or years. Then we have to review the data. Here we go. The last sentence. These reviews occur normally every 3 to 5 years after that initial operational capability or when precipitated by changes in requirement. We got a different requirement. And so 3 to 5 years from when you initially put it into operations, then 3 to 5 years, you're going to test it. Is this still fulfilling the capability gap? We need to make some changes. What's going on? The bottom of page 8 kind of jumps back now to some documents. So key life cycle sustainment documents that throughout this process. So as the chapters go through, it's not that they're developing or talking about a new concept. What they're doing is they're trying to group documents, group processes, group phases. They're putting it in a group. So at the bottom of page 448, we are grouping the documents, which started off when the Joint Requirements Oversight Council does the Joint Capabilities Integration and Development System, JCIT. So they have their strategy. They conducted the JCIT process. That's all the forces are represented by the JROC. They represent the warfighter. Then they identify the capability gaps and potential solutions. That capability gap is published in an initial capabilities document. Based on what we see, what the strategy is, these are our current capabilities. These are what we are missing. But also along the process of that pre-systems acquisition, that sustainment process, you have the ICD is first, then you come in with the capability development document. So as we're going through the process, we got a capability development document. And then the third document is a capability production document, right? So what capability as we develop it and capability as we produce it, because we're learning more about the capability as we're going through the processes. Now, only thing I want to see to make sure they support the key supporting documents and so forth. Some other documents on page 449. We talk about analysis of the alternatives and the material solution analysis, right? So we move from the ICD, we took that document, then who gives us guidance on the AOA? That is the Director of Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation, the DK. And it says the AOA should describe and include the results of the supportability analysis and trade-offs. Are there any trade-offs? That's what you're doing when you're analyzing different courses of action. Is there anything, maybe a trade-off, meaning I don't really need this part, but I need this part, or I need something that's cheaper. Then you move on to technology development strategy. Before you enter the technology development phase, you have a technology development strategy document. That's where the TDS should also include specific new sustainment, reducing technology risk. So what type of technology requirements does this aircraft have to sustain the key performance parameters, key supporting activities? What is it supposed to be able to do? Acquisition program baseline was also discussed. The APB documents requirements, schedule, cost, schedule, performance, and it has to be approved by the MDA. Then we move on before when milestone B kicks off, that's your acquisition strategy. See, all of this is repetitive. It's just taking all the bits and pieces that were discussed earlier. Now you have all the documents in one place. And yes, you're going to have to know them, but most importantly, you're going to have to know where does the documents come into play. Test and evaluation, the temp. You got the test that supports the technology and development strategy, and the TEMP, which is the test and evaluation master plan, which supports your acquisition strategy. It's not stated here, but if you go back a few competencies, that will be repeated. And we also, on the last video, talk about the systems engineering plan, the SEP. Also the same thing. A SEP is done starting at milestone A to support the technology development strategy, and milestone B to support the acquisition strategy. That's what was stated in 4.3. And then we close in with on page 4410, we rally in the life cycle sustainment plan document. Under DOTI 5000.02 is what requires that the program manager also completes the life cycle sustainment plan as part of, it's included in the acquisition strategy document. So that's the document, how you're going to, the strategy that's going to be used for that equipment. We talked earlier about the program manager coming into agreement with what the warfighter needs are. Outcome is, what do we want to accomplish? Program manager talks to them, and then the program manager job is to go out and get a contractor to provide that capability. I don't care what kind of aircraft, give me an aircraft that's gonna fill that capability gap. So performance-based life cycle support is that whole process. And so let's move on to page 4413, second paragraph, first line. It says the essence of that performance-based life cycle support is buying performance outcome. You're buying outcome, not the individual parts and repair action. Meaning I'm not buying an aircraft that does XYZ. I'm buying XYZ that is done by that aircraft. Does that make sense? I'm buying the outcome. So understand the PBL concept is buying performance outcome. Item number 10. Again, I look for these kind of triggers as I'm studying. It says award contracts. The preferred PBL contracting approach is the use of long-term contracts with incentives tied to performance. If you perform or you produce this product early, we give you an incentive. We pay extra amount. And on top of it, we give you a bonus. So long-term contracts with incentive is the preferred PBL. Performance-based agreement. So the agreement and the diagram on page 15 says, if you look in the middle of that diagram, you see the PM, program manager, in the middle. On the right side, you have the force provider. On the left side, you have the support provider. So the right side is your warfighter. Specifies required performance metric. So I would have done it the other way, where it comes in from the force provider, the warfighter, and then show it. But we'll work with what we have. All right. And so on the right side, the force provider is your warfighter. They say we need an aircraft that does XYZ specifics. We enter in a performance agreement with the program manager. Then on the left side, the industry, organic support provider. The program manager then goes out and look for a contractor, of course, going through the contracting process. It's not just, hey, pick one. They go through to find the one that will be responsible for meeting that capability that we asked about, that performance metrics that the warfighter requested. And in the middle, it buys performance as a package. I need something that's going to be able to do XYZ. An aircraft that goes in quickly, it has a capability stealth mode or whatever. But as a capability or performance package, then the program manager buys it. So visibility into costs, risk decisions across the life cycle. The program manager is in the middle as he's checking both sides and making sure that performance-based agreement is met by that industry, by that organization, by that contractor, so that it fulfills the warfighter needs. So the program manager enters the PBA agreement with the user, and then the program manager also enters into agreement with that commercial contractor, all in sync to meet the capabilities requested from the warfighter. So you have performance-based life cycle sustainment, and it is done by a PBL or a PBA, performance-based agreements between the program manager, user, and the contractor. All right. So that's the easy one. That was life cycle sustainment. We are coming up with the plan. We, as the program manager, coming up with the plan to sustain our aircraft. And we have certain considerations that we have to think about as we do that. The program manager enters into this performance-based requirement or agreement, looking at the metrics of what we buy outcome and not individual parts. So that's what you have to remember from this section. All right. If you have not already subscribed to our YouTube page, please, sir, please, ma'am, please go ahead and subscribe so that we get more visibility on the YouTube platform. We thank you for stopping by. This is Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group. I'll see you guys again next time. Thank you.